Okay, so some people are still coming in, but because we're a bit behind on time tonight, I'm just gonna plow through this. So thank you very much for rejoining us for what is the fourth part of our evening. Thank you so much for being such an attentive audience, and I have to give a shout out to Kim, who's in the back right now, for organizing this event and being everywhere tonight, so thank you so much, Kim. So I guess I should introduce myself first. My name is Jamie Wong, and I am an instructor here at the Learning Center, and I'm going to be moderating the panel discussion. So we've been calling it a panel, but we are truly hoping for a conversation about adult learning experiences, wisdom, questions, and as our theme is tonight, reimaginations. So it'll be like a completely normal conversation that you have in a theater full of people staring at you that you can't see. But at the end of it, we will have a Q&A where you can ask your own questions. But hopefully the conversation that we have on the stage tonight will prompt some questions that you may want to ask later. So the panelists tonight will be discussing the adult education, adult learning lenses, and the lenses will be further developed by the learning groups that were mentioned earlier tonight. So I won't say too much about that because the panelists are more involved in it than I am. So I'll just briefly introduce our panelists, and hopefully you will each share what you know and maybe a little bit more about yourself throughout this conversation. So I'll say your name, and if you could give a little wave to the audience, that would be fantastic. So Karen Bruno, she is a friend of the Learning Center, and she has been for many years. Having experienced the retirement stage of life, I'm so sorry, I didn't write this. She is currently working in the inner city. So hello, Karen, welcome. We also have Roxanne Olson. Roxanne's a new student at the center, and she's also a student with YTC, Yellowhead Tribal College, located here at the Orange Hub. And I can also personally attest that Roxanne is a very passionate learner and a great student. We also have Fitzroy Providence. Fitzroy's been attending the Learning Center since we moved to the Orange Hub last year, and he juggles learning with work. So he has a lot going on. We also have Richard Fedderson, a student himself at the University of Alberta, and he's also an instructor here at the center. So welcome, Richard. And finally, last but not least, Marco Luciano, who is the director with Migrant Alberta. Bringing a new partnership to the center, he's offering programming on weekends. So welcome, panelists. So to start the conversation, maybe talk about what has engaged you with adult learning. How did you come to become interested in adult learning, whether you are a student or a teacher, or if this is just a topic that you are particularly passionate about? If you could just talk a little bit about that.
Okay. I don't know. Is it my on? Okay. Well, I think adult learning is very important, and I'm just borrowing a few words from a few people, because as adults, you still continuously learning all the time, and it's quite a privilege to to have a education besides what you already known from since you started from kindergarten all the way up to grade 12 and college. So yeah, I think this is a wonderful journey to be here at the Learning Center and able to use some of the things that they taught us, and also to also bring it into the society and to help society out. Some of the other things that I realized too is that having this advantage also is to help learning some of the things that's going on with whether it's music, healthcare, able to speak for those who are unable to speak. Just a really wonderful journey into having this privilege again. So that's my take in all of this for now.
Hello. I guess my learning journey itself into adult learning has been a long and vast one. So as a young child, I was raised in the city, and we moved quite often, so every 6 months to a year I would experience a new school. And so as a child, I was just in survival mode, trying to fit in, and was quite sometimes very difficult because of poverty and racism and that kind of thing. So my focus was in education. By the time I graduated high school, I had about a grade 4 education, and I did graduate. Students or teachers were well aware, and I was also homeless at the time and 6 months pregnant. So my experience with education was more of a survival mechanism and a place to go than it was about education. As a young adult, I realized that in order for me to try and move forward, I would need somewhat of an education. Even just to work at a restaurant or anything, I would need more than a grade 4. And so I actually started at the Learning Center many years ago when it was in the basement of an inner city agency. And there was one retired teacher named Mary who took a vast interest in helping me learn, got confident enough to get to about a grade 6, and then continued my education with what was called it's Norquist now, but it was called something else, I can't remember, ACT or something, I can't remember. Anyways, and studied there for a while, got confident enough to go to college. I definitely was not a scholar by no means. I spent a lot of time upstairs in the library getting support. I definitely didn't get high marks, but I made enough to pass. I was one of the oldest and the only Indigenous student in college, and most of my classes when I was young too. So it was very difficult, and I also was a single mother of 3 at the time and living in my own situation of poverty and sort of struggling with some addiction issues. So it was very difficult. Education was very difficult, but I knew that's what I needed to do to try and move forward. And that allowed me to go to college, which allowed me to work a career. So that was my experience, and then came my children's experience. And my children's experience was very much the same in terms of I tried to send them to good schools. I had learned from sort of my own experience and tried to stay in a home so that they could have that repetition of education, but they were labeled. A lot of times they were in behavioral classes. There wasn't a lot of high expectations on them. They definitely felt the discriminatory minority kind of feeling that they felt in school. And they also really had a hard time just sitting in class. A lot of my kids were very much experiential learners. It got to the point where even in junior high, all 3 of my kids, I had told them, if it's too hard on you, then you're gonna have to go back as an adult and learn then. Because I could just see that it was very stressful on them to be in that system. So I decided to take him to a school where the majority of the teachers and the majority of the students were Indigenous. But I also knew that they weren't going to get the education that they needed, because I also knew that the majority of the Indigenous schools had teachers that were either on the verge of getting fired or they were first-year teachers. So, you weren't getting the best of the education sometimes in some of the Indigenous schools. So they all are adults. I can read to about a grade 9, and I'm just not comfortable reading at all. But I've made a good career of it and of myself. And I am very open and honest with my coworkers about my abilities. I've been a manager for many years, and reports and stuff aren't my thing. It's something I support and delegate. But, I've managed to manage. My oldest son does not read or write at all. My daughter struggles also, has never finished a high school, but is successfully working in a social work field. I told her she'll have to earn that the hard way. And my son, other son, is working in a labor field, which he'll have to go back to education because your body can only do so much in that field. So now I have grandchildren. So this is a third generation, and I have one that's 7 years old. He is now in grade 1. His first year was very hard on him. And I had the same conversation with my daughter about the decision I had to make. It was either go to a good school and feel the pressures of being a minority and labeled, or go to an Indigenous school and take that sacrifice around education. So we've managed to take him out of the school that he was in and find us another school. And I just, from my experience, my daughter's very active in ensuring that his education is up to par and that they have high expectations on him, and that she has high expectations on him, and she keeps the school accountable. And that's just from, my learnings of dealing with schools. And from myself to my kids' experience to now my grandson's experience. And I also work in a field where I work with people who are struggling with addiction, mental health, and homelessness, and that's been my 30-year career. And I recognize that one of the biggest issues is the inability to read for a lot of our people. So it's definitely something that I know that is a really struggle for our people when education is compromised because of racism and discrimination.
Hi, I'm Roxanne. I guess I'll just be honest and kind of speak from the heart. My education, I struggled in school. I had a hard time focusing, and I often was sent into like a separate room for my learning, and it didn't do so well. I struggled to make it through, and I did. And then around the grade 11, I got the opportunity to go work out in the oil field. So I took a $28 hour job, dropped grade 11, and continued what I thought would be a great life, and soon found out that it was pretty much just me standing in a dirt pile and paying somebody to essentially raise my kid for me. And this was like 17 hours a day. It didn't leave very much time for me to be at home, so I eventually had enough of that. I had quit and worked in Edmonton here just as retail, just to spend time with my family. And then I had 3 more kids, and they started also struggling with behavioral issues and just really required me to be at home with them, appointments and such, and the pressures of like needing to be at work and everything was just so much that I was spread too thin. And I wanted to go make something of myself and go to school, and I just could not find what I wanted to do, what would make me happy. And then finally, this program at YTC had opened up, and it was very holistic, and it was just everything that I wanted, nutrition and addictions and a lot of the issues that we face as Indigenous. And I started taking school, but as I took my school, I found I was struggling with like everything. And I started going to the adult literacy program, and they've been supporting me, helping me with my learning. And in that, I hope to really help my community and give back where I feel like these underrepresented and these issues just need to like be brought up and solved differently with a more holistic approach with cultural awareness. And that's where I'm at.
My name is Marco. I work a lot with migrant workers, temporary foreign workers, caregivers, and I have mixed thoughts with adult learning, right? And having said that, I thought it's really important for communities to access, adult learning facility. But on the other hand, though, the way adult learning is structured in North America, in Canada, is really towards career path. It's towards finding a job. It's towards making you compete with another worker, right? So I think that's where my mixed kind of feeling about adult learning, and I think in my work for the last 20 years with migrant workers, I've seen many nurses from the Philippines, I'm Filipino, Pinoy, that come to Canada and become a domestic worker, right? Working at middle-class homes, white middle-class homes, and suddenly these white middle-class homes have a nurse in their homes, right? Not only taking care of kids, but also cleaning, driving people, and things like that. And they never have access to, getting their job as a nurse here, because suddenly there's a ceiling that does not allow them to move forward. And for others, they were told that, well, your English is not good enough. And then they go to school and learn English, and suddenly you hear, well, you're stealing our jobs, right? You can win, right? It's just here or there. But I think for me as an educator, as an organizer, I think learning is really important if it's integrated to grassroots organizing. And it's important that what we learn, whether that's English as a second language or whatnot, it reflects our daily lives in the community. I'll give you an example. We have been doing for the last 3 years an IELTS, or CELPIP review classes. And this is for the migrant workers that are sort of wanted to process their papers in order for them to become permanent resident. And a lot of them failed, and the review classes cost $300, and we start offering this, right? For a couple of years, we get access to a room in our first year, first couple of batch, through APERG. Shout out APERG out there. And then we can't get rooms anymore. But what we did, we continue and start occupying spaces, and it has become, one of our friends have dubbed it as a guerrilla language class, because we actually do, for the last 3 years, we've been doing English class in rooms that are not booked for us, right? occupying those spaces. And it has become a political education that these spaces should be free. These spaces should be accessible. Until, of course, I met Denis. You know, we got a space here, and now we're legit.
No, you're not.
Right? Yeah, and we're excited to be partnered with the Learning Center. But I think also having this language class as a requirement, or this IELTS exam as a requirement for permanent residency, is very discriminatory. You know, these people have been working in an English community, working for English employers, talking English to their kids. The kids learning Tagalog, but as a requirement to become a permanent resident, as a requirement to become a citizen of Canada, is very discriminatory. It shuts down opportunities for migrant workers to stay, and many of them failed. Many of them fall into the cracks. A lot of them, up to 500,000, they said, are undocumented because they cannot, pass, this language test. And the blame is dumped on these individuals, because you cannot speak English, because you can't read, right? So this whole structure of how adult learning, on the other hand, I thought it has to be changed, right? My thoughts.
Well, if you look at me, it's not a big surprise. The system is made for me. And I've had a lot of opportunities to figure out how much the system is designed for me. The mic. I've experienced that in 4 different countries. I'm from Germany originally. I've studied abroad in Japan. I've taught in Jordan. Now I'm here at the University of Alberta as well. And even in countries that weren't even majority white, I still had that privilege there. And so the system is made for me all over the world. And so over the time, thinking about what social justice means, I also learned that, this cannot be separated from education, and this cannot be separated from questioning the system that is made for me. At the same time, as an instructor, I teach German, and I've taught it in Jordan. I'm teaching it here. It's very hard to break out of the system when you're in it. And so, on the other hand, the Learning Center is an opportunity to finally work on dismantling the system that is made for me, and also make it for other people. And so that's all why I'm here, to just give a little back from the privilege that I have. And I'm making mistakes. I've been complicit in reproducing the oppression of the system in the past, and still today, because it's a long process to unlearn that as a teacher. But little steps every day.
Oh, okay, you're going out there, I'm staying here. Okay, so I really got to lose some weight. Was the mic on? Is my mic on? Can we get somebody, is my mic on? Yeah, okay. Okay, so you're going to go out there. So we're going to have a brief question and answer. I can't see anything though. Somebody. We're going to have a brief question and answer to any member of our panel. And by the way, thank you very much. I appreciate the honesty. Yeah, I think so. I think so. Can we get those lights out of our eyes so we can see who's asking the questions, please? Who
I would like
controls
to
the
ask
lights?
I would like to ask the first
Is there
question.
anybody out there even?
can't hear me. I said I would like to ask the first question.
Okay, Marco, go ahead.
If I
Who are
may.
you asking? Oh, Rinaldo hasn't spoken yet. Ask Rinaldo.
Yeah, I think you have mentioned about the last part of your presentation. Is it on?
Yeah, it's
okay,
on.
cool. Around the issue of citizenship and nation states and I guess strategy on or re-strategizing on how we look at citizenship. I guess my question is that how do you see that being inclusive to the current wave of migration, for example? I guess in the last 20 years, 25 years, migration has changed. You know, people said that for the last 100 years, well, migration is shifting. It's never shift, right? It's always determined by capital, right? Migration is always determined by the needs of imperialist nations. So when the new wave of migrants come in from different areas of the countries, the global south, how do you see that sort of being part of how you see citizenship?
So a couple of things. One is, I guess the first part of what I was articulating there is around the kind of question of what possible new imaginaries can we have for thinking about citizenship. And one of those is to think about a notion of no borders. So that's something that I was playing with and gesturing to. But I totally agree with you around, in the last, one might say the last 30 or 40 years, right? When you invoked the domestic workers, the nurses, of course we know that the history of that foreign workers scheme in this country began with Caribbean women and both Caribbean women and men going to farms and Caribbean women coming as domestic laborers in homes, and it's transformed over the years. But the thing about capital is that if in one moment capital was taking people to, when capital was more extractive, it was taking people to the jobs. Now capital assumes that capital gets to move. And so the foreign and guest worker programs are a way to try to manage a certain element of migration. And as we know, they're temporary programs. The people are not supposed to stay. But the thing that capital has not been able to do is capital thinks that it can manage movement, but there's always unplanned movement. And that's the part that becomes the real trick, right? So the folks coming up, say, from Honduras up the spine of, right? That's unplanned movement. That's not movement that capital has ordered, right? So capital wants to move, and it only wants labor to move when it says labor can move. But people move all the time, and people will continue to move. And so we have to think differently about what we do with the unplanned movements of people, because that's the tricky one. So, people talk about Africans moving across the Mediterranean, but, most Africans actually move inside the African continent. The majority move inside the African continent, and we also know that, prior to colonial contact, people moved across the Americas, which is not to say that people didn't have traditional homelands and so on, but people moved across the Americas. So there are ways of thinking about how we can organize, how we live together, that doesn't have to be around hard and fast notions of borders. But yes, as long as capital is organizing how we think about movement, we're going to run into this problem. But there's also movement that happens outside the capital. People move for all kinds of reasons. And of course, with ecological disaster, people are going to be moving even more. And capital is the cause of it, but capital will not be able to shape those movements when people say, look, I can't live on this land anymore, so I'm going to move to this place, and we're going to have to deal with that. We're going to have to find ways to deal with it. So I'm almost at a no borders kind of logic here, yeah.
I just want to respond to that question as an Indigenous person. So you're talking about citizenship within Canada and how we can move forward in a way that works. As Indigenous people, the original peoples of this land, when the Europeans came, we engaged. We took a worldview. Just like you said, no borders. We took a worldview, and it was about sharing, and our intention was to share the resources, learning, sharing, taking our teachings, our values, and being able to share the resources of this land. It's more or less what he's saying. If we take a worldview within Canada, or just even the world, and realize that it's one world. It's one world. Then we can actually move forward. But he's right. You guys are right. As long as there's capitalism, as long as there's resources, the oil, all that kind of stuff, and we're not sharing amongst and making things, for instance, education, more accessible to our newcomers, our Indigenous people, that kind of thing. Well, that'll never happen. Because when it comes down to it, just like he said, the New World Order is not going to let that exist. There are things within Canada that exist that will always keep people suppressed. There are systems that are purposefully developed. The White Paper, the Indian Act, we can go on. Indian residential schools, that kind of thing. Now I'm going to narrow it down because I do have a worldview of most times, and that's how I treat people of this land, whether you're from somewhere else or from here. I take a worldview. But at the same time, as a kokum, as a grandmother, I have to take a very specific view. And when I talked about education earlier, and I had that conversation with my daughter about, you're going to have to make a decision. Me and my partner, had made a decision that as Indigenous people, it was going to be very important because we had lost this, especially for me, maybe not for him, but because my mother was raised in situations that were not her traditional ways, that had gotten lost. And that's why I ended up in the city, because she wanted me to learn the non-native way in order to survive, which totally did not work. I got involved in drugs, alcohol, violence. I lived on the streets. I did all that stuff because of the racism, discrimination, homelessness, and she lost her sense of culture and community. Didn't learn my language. But we had made a cognitive decision to teach our grandchildren the Indian way first. That's the true education. And so that little boy who's labeled ADHD in school, because he can't sit still, can sit in a ceremony for 4 hours without budging, without moving, while pipe is being smoked, while Sundance is being done. He can hunt. He understands snaring. He understands that you have to put tobacco down before you kill an animal. You have to give Creator thanks when you do kill an animal, that you only kill what you eat. That's the natural worldview of taking what you only need, not taking more than you're supposed to. So when you talk about citizenship from an Indigenous point of view, that would be our Indigenous point of view. I just felt I needed to say that.
We got a question there?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. We have a question over here for Richard.
Hi, Richard. This is for the adults, students. That's a lot of us here wanted to go to education. But again, like some panelists mentioned about discrimination because of our age. As you know, we can't really get into education because we get some barrier about you're not going to make it, you're too old. So what I'm pointing here, what kind of advice to all the adult students to come here listening today at the Learning Center? That Learning Center is for adults or for everyone, any age. What kind of message to give them to get them sparked and in the morning to get up and like sparkling, like I have to go to school because I really wanted to finish my education. And like to keep them going without like stopping because there's things that they can't make it because of their age. Is there things that can give it to us? Like, I know you've been all over different countries. I'm sure you have experience. So can you give us a little advice so we can keep ourselves, our vision, our goal, not to be dead? Thank you.
First of all, it's amazing. Again, remember that I've been handed things, but you are learning, whether you are in an institution or not. Every day you're learning something new. You're never too old to learn, and I cannot make the discrimination go away on my own, of course, but I hope that you still have the courage to come to class if that's what you want, because you're never too old. In science we know this now. We just have to figure out a way to get it from what we know theoretically and get it into society. And remember that, though, that really every day you're learning something new, and you don't need a teacher for that. You're not reliant on the teachers. The teachers are there, to cheer you on. They are there to help, of course, but you're the one who's making that happen already, and that's pretty awesome. I hope that you find teachers who can help you on your path, but it's your path. The teachers are not the ones with all the knowledge. The teachers are not the people who have all the knowledge and have all the answers. I have more questions than answers myself. And in my idea of a good teacher is someone who helps you achieve what you want to do. And if that's going back to school at 60, 70, 80, 90, whatever age, that's awesome. That's great. And yeah, is that something that helps you? Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so panelists, do you have anything to add to that? No? Okay, we have a comment over here.
Yeah, I have a lot of comments. I'm just going to make it a quick one here, though. Maybe, first of all, is the panel going to be available for questions later? At all? I wonder.
They're available for questions right now.
Okay, well, I have a lot of things I'd like to talk about, but I don't want to take everybody's time. So the first thing I want to say is you're never too old to learn, ever. I learn stuff every day, and I'm fortunate enough right now to be attending a Humanities 101 at the University of Alberta, and it's a free education. And it's, I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but a lot of people that go there have had a tough lifestyle from other countries and whatnot, and it's a wonderful program. I want to commend all you panelists. You guys are all success stories. Miss Bruno, I have to say, I hope I got your name right. You've lived it, you've experienced it, 3 generations. Good for you, good for your daughter, good for your grandchildren. Well done.
Thank you very much.
We have time. We have time for one more question. And if no one has a question, I have a question. We got questions out there? Oh. Wow. Do we?
Thank you very much. My question is for Rinaldo. I'm a graduate student at the University of Alberta, and you know, one thing, I guess one of the big topics is, or one of the things that you often hear when, you know, issues around the university are discussed is representation, right? Representation of you need more Black people, more Indigenous people in these institutions. But I've also been privileged to read some of your work where you critique some of these moves. I remember a tweet from you where you said there's no point sitting at a broken table. And if some of these institutions are by default racist and exclusionary, then why are we pushing for more representation at some of these institutions? And sometimes that makes me, you know, I feel this sort of guilt as a graduate student who is hopefully doing work that will contribute to some change, but at the same time, by default, I'm reproducing. Just by being a graduate student in the academy, you almost feel complicit. So I'm thinking about what are the ways that I, as a student, can start to repair some of these damages. And I'm just wondering if you can speak more, or you can provide some, you know, more comment on that point about no point sitting at a broken table.
Thank you for the question. Tonight I was hinting at two things, right? I used the words reconciliation, reparation, but I was using them radically different from how they're presently being used. What I was hinting at is that, you know, the work that we do now is work that is building towards something that is to come. So you shouldn't think that because you're a graduate student that you're simply producing the normative way of doing things. You can be, but you don't have to be, right? That we occupy spaces and we take up positions in relationship to imagining something different. So we're doing the work to build something different. And I think, as my colleague was just pointing out here, is that they're also right now with us, present still, other worldviews, other ways of thinking about how we can organize our lives. And so, you know, for those of like you and I who are in institutions like universities, part of the work that we have to do is to create more space for those worldviews to take up residence in those spaces and thereby begin the work of transforming those spaces. So I don't ever feel that because I'm a university professor that I'm somehow compromised. I see myself as doing some kind of work to make something else become possible. So that's the task ahead. Now, of course, we can also enter these institutions and become, if you will, complicit with them reproducing the normative violences that they come from. I've been talking to Denny about the thing that's happening here with the young Black man who wore to school a do-rag, and the resource officer, who's a retired cop, immediately read that as somehow being gang-related, and so on and so forth. So that's one way in which institutions, you begin to see how all of the institutions come together to render someone a problem as outside of those institutions. So, you know, you can have that, or you can be in those institutions attempting to make particular kinds of change. Now, of course, we're not going to transform them immediately, but we want to set the groundwork for the potential transformation.
All right. Fitzroy, you want to make one comment?
Am I clear? And to borrow your speech there with Nelson Mandela, he knew he started off wrong in his time, and while he was in prison, for many decades, he was learning, as far as I understood. He was learning a lot of different things while he was in prison. He learned that he lost his wife, his family. He lost everything. Nelson Mandela also made a choice to rethink how he was, how he was going to think about his people and the rest of his nation while he was there. And at the time when he was finally released after so many years, many people thought the worst, or thinking this revenge and so on was going to take place. But what they thought was a big surprise. He actually reformed the whole entire nation, and it started with him making a decision to change the way he once thought about something, and to implement that change and change the people one by one. Started from the time he got into power, and his cabinet one by one, and many of them was convincing him to do something about the other half of his countrymen. But Nelson Mandela decided not to go that route. He decided to work with the very ones that he had to deal with the hardest first, and his very own people. And then he decided to branch out to reach the other ones around him. So I will say, if for the lady who's getting older and in her senior years, whether you have a job or not for right now, if you're going back to school, finish it. Yeah, you finish the task, and then once that's finished, there's going to be other ideas that you can always implement as you go, and maybe there might be other people might give you ideas also too. But I think you'll do very well. And there's and for all the stories we hear on the stage, you notice from some of the talks here, there's quite a bit of difficulty happened in the early years of our lives or in their lives, and they made a choice to do something about it. And I really do believe that when a person decided to change their thinking, that's when you see the implements coming forward to reach someone else around your society. So again, this is where the privilege of having the education eventually will impact future generation, especially when you build it on the right foundation. So.
Thank you, Fitzroy. Okay, so that will conclude our little panel session. I want to thank Richard, Karen, Roxanne, Fitzroy, Marco, and Rinaldo. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, before you leave the stage, I would like to call upon Trevor Phillips, who is he was the co-chair of the steering committee that has been meeting over the last 2 years. It seemed like an eternity, but he is now the chair, and he's going to have some closing remarks for us. Trevor.
Thank you, Danae. Thank you, panelists. Is my mic on? I feel like I'm supposed to ask that when we start. I appreciate it. thought I originally was asked up here to moderate the panel for Denise questions. This is why I thought I was going to be asked up here. But I want to thank all of you for sharing your stories, powerful stories, each and every one of you, on your journeys towards education, to helping those aspire to learn and aspire to improve their literacy levels for your communities, for your people, for whoever drives you to do what you do. I want to introduce myself first. I am Trevor Phillips, manager of Indigenous recruitment at the University of Alberta and a board member here at the Learning Centre. And my family is original Métis Riverlot folk here on the North Saskatchewan River by way of Cooking Lake after we relocated due to Scripps. So I grew up in this area. This is my hometown. I grew up just outside of this orange hub. Used to fool around on the stairs, try to figure out how to get in here so I could toilet paper the joint. And that was why when during the intermission, I ran next door and grabbed some Dairy Queen. People were like, what were you doing? Good Métis always knows which way the wind is blowing, and it was blowing towards Dairy Queen so I could get something to eat. My job here is to wrap this up. I'm supposed to thank you all for coming. I'm also supposed to invite you tomorrow to take part in our community lunch where we kick off the needs assessment that we've been planning for so long. It is a community-driven idea. It is a community-driven initiative, and we need your input at the community lunch tomorrow. So please come to the Orange Hub tomorrow around noon if you're hungry, get something to eat, and help us drive the conversation about how to improve our services for folks who are seeking to improve their literacy and attain education to chase down their goals. As I mentioned, I'm in Indigenous recruitment, and so I spend a lot of my time going around Alberta and the North visiting Indigenous communities and their schools, and talking to their youth and their learners. And I see invitations to learn happen in a lot of different ways. And one of the most affectionate ones I've ever seen was when I visited a Northern Dene community earlier this year. And I was scheduled to speak to about 15 folks at this event, 15 young Indigenous Dene learners in this community. I won't name it because I don't have their consent to tell this story, but if I did, I would love to, because I love this place, and it's a very beautiful place, and it's in Treaty 8. And when I went to visit them, there was nobody at the school on a school day. It's a one-room log house on the reserve. And when I got there to talk about aspiring to higher learning, there was nobody there. Nobody at all, in fact. There was nobody in the building. So I sat around and waited in the parking lot, and a few people drove by and pulled over to ask me what I was doing there and why I was standing in their parking lot, which is a fair question. So I said to them, well, I'm here to speak to the youth of the community about going to the university, and I was wondering if you knew where the principal was. And they said, yeah, we know where she is. And I said, where is she? They said, she's driving her quad around their houses to wake them up so they'll come hear you speak. And I thought about that as an invitation to learn. I thought about that as an act of affection from one of the leaders in their community designed to get their youth to school. I thought about invitations as being abrasive, and sometimes they need to wake us up and charge us and make us think more critically about what kind of invitations are being handed to us. A lot the way that Dr. Walcott challenged us intellectually today when thinking about what it is we need to do to dismantle a world full of boundaries and a world full of barriers. But I also thought about the love in that action, how she didn't want her kids to miss something that might be valuable to them to drive them to something more important, or to something that can change their lives or transform their learning situations, which is what I learned from all of you in hearing your stories, and how it can drive and inspire people to achieve a higher learning opportunity. When Dr. Steinhauer opened us up today, she asked us to think about what we aspire to do by coming here, each and every one of us. And then she spoke the language. And I always love hearing folks speak their language, if they can do it, because it takes us back thousands of years before systematic barriers existed perceivably in education and in language and in access to transportation and housing and those types of things. She asked us to think about how to aspire to something. What are we aspiring to do? And I think what this needs assessment, what this ad hoc committee has been trying to do, is to hear what the folks who come to our center to learn are experiencing every day. And this panel did that tonight. And so I hope you all do come tomorrow to share your stories, to guide us in this process, to contribute your knowledge, and to contribute your perspective as we seek to lower boundaries and lower barriers for people to learn and for us to uplift the whole people together. So thank you for coming, for spending your Friday night with us, eating some popcorn, drinking the pop, eating the chocolate bars. You must be starving. This went right through dinner. And hanging on every single word, like you've done tonight with our incredible panelists, our guest speaker, everybody here. And I want to thank Denis and his team, Kim, Alyssa, everybody here who has done this work for us, as well as everybody on the committee for helping us get through it. And thank you to you for spending your time with us. So thank you.
Ding, 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 you're dismissed.